Thank you very much. I am excited to be here. I do a lot of tutorials online, as Jesse mentioned, and I do some in-person stuff. Webinars is a little bit different because it's like I'm teaching a tutorial online, but I don't have the direct feedback and questions as I am in person. So I'll see what I can do to make this the most enjoyable for you. Now, for what we're doing today is we're creating some movie trailer titles using the BCC9. So here is a render out of what I've created. Maybe my hard drive needs to spool up. It'll be just a second. Okay, here we go. So a lot of cool stuff going on in this. Let's kind of look at this really quickly, and then I can show you the project, and we'll build it from scratch. So really nice looking lens flare. We've got 3D text revealing in with these kind of line light glint things. A subtitle. You can see there's kind of a
Hey, Mikey.
Yeah.
We can't see anything. We can't see anything.
Okay. Thank you. I know what I did wrong.
Sure.
Boom. Here we go. You should be able to see it now. Can you see it now?
Yep. Yes.
Perfect. Yes, I was showing just the After Effects and not my screen. Okay. So here is the example. And as I said, this is suitable for like a movie trailer title. You know, after the movie trailer plays, you can see this nice title. It's inspired from the Agent 47 Hitman movie trailers. But then I kind of went with it and added a bunch more stuff to make it my own. So what we can see here is a really nice looking lens flare, 3D text kind of revealing in, these vertical light glint things. The subtitle pops on, and then this really cool transition into a logo. And instead of doing just a boring extruded logo, I added a little bit of a curve to this, and it adds a lot of life and dimension. And it's super easy using the 3D extrude that comes with BCC9. So let's look at this, the project file, and what we have. We've got it. I've got it separated up into. We've got the background. We've got the text. We've got the crop and the flare, my camera, and then the logo at the end that I reveal to. So when I create this, let's go ahead and create it from the bottom up. And right here, so the bottom is the background, and we'll work our way upwards when we create this. So let's start with a brand new composition. I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to be using Mac hotkeys, and I'll explain them as I go along. I'm not 100% sure what the Windows equivalent is, but in most cases it's probably just Control instead of Command. So Command N will bring up a new composition. 1920 by 1080. 5 seconds long is plenty long. Give it a name. Okay. So to start, we're going to start with creating kind of that bokeh background. And something important that I need to talk about, and I don't have it, I already have it set up this way, but let me show you how it works, is making sure you're in a linear workspace in a 16-bit per channel workspace. So, but let's first build this by, let's grab a new solid, that's Command Y. Give it a name. And let's make that white, and we're going to add to this the Boris particles. We're going to use the particle system. And I want to make kind of just some lightly moving around particles. And so first thing I want to do is I want to create like a burst of particles that come on the scene. Or I guess I want them to already be there. I don't want the particles to kind of be born and kind of gradually pop on. So let's go to the birth rate. And what I'm going to do is let's bring this up to 300. Keyframe that. move forward just a couple of frames. And then I'm going to hit U down on the keyboard as I have this layer selected, and it'll bring up that keyframe. Let's add a keyframe to it. So I want a couple of frames of 300, and then I'm going to go next and bring that down to 0. And so if we watch this, it should look kind of like a firework. But what that's doing is it's just giving a first initial of 600 particles right there at the beginning. Let's go ahead and bring our lifespan up really high just in case, and because I want them to not disappear either. Now, but they're moving everywhere. I kind of want them to be just kind of floating in the air, and so I need to change the movement. And down, if we look in the effect window, we can have movement. Let's take that gravity, and I want them to kind of move, so I'm going to do like a negative 0.5 on the gravity. And let's take the velocity down. Okay, there's still one more place that I need to change, and that's the initial velocity. So in production, let's take that down to 0, and we can see that now they're all kind of in the one spot, and they're slowly moving up. So I need to, let's just take the width and the height and the depth, and that's kind of the look I'm wanting. Just really light and slow like that. And they all, do you see that how they all died out at the end? That means I need to increase the lifespan a little bit longer. So let's make sure that's long enough to reach the end of the composition. And then I don't want them to kind of pop on at the beginning like this, so I'm going to just take this whole layer and just scoot it over off of the left side. Now, what I want to do to this is I want to add a lens blur to give it a nice out of focus look. So let's grab a new adjustment layer, give it a name, and let's go into our effects. And under the blur and sharpen is the lens blur. And this is a really nice look. It gives kind of that bokeh look like I had talked about. And I want to come in and bring the iris scale up. Change the quality, and let's make this a circle. And there's actually a lot of particles here. I think maybe too many. So I'm going to come in to that particle layer, and let's change that birth rate. Let's go down to 150 on both of those, just to drop the particles in half. And that looks pretty good. Now what you're seeing here is kind of a really nice out of focus look, and this is where I want to talk about a linear workflow. So how to change that, I already have that set up this way, but if I switch it back, so I'm going to switch this first over to 18 bits, and you'll notice that these don't look nearly as nice. And then switch that to none, and then everything disappears. Talking a linear workflow, basically it flattens out everything, and it adds, when you're adding things on top of each other with blending modes and things like that, when you have a linear workflow, it's going to make things look a lot more natural. So if we come in here, change this workspace to like this sRGB, and then right here, this checkbox that says linearize working space, it's going to make things look a lot nicer. And then also make sure I have at least 16 bits. And you're going to be able to see this out of focus. So that's just when you're setting up a workspace, make sure you have it that way, and everything's going to work a lot more naturally the way you're expecting. Okay. So now also with these particles, though, I want to create this 3D, because I'm going to be using a camera later on where I'm going to want this to kind of rotate and work with the camera. So after this, next thing we want to do is let's start working with the text. So I'm going to grab a new, just a new solid. We'll call this 3D text. Click OK. And then we're going to add to this, in the Boris, there's the 3D objects, and there's two types of 3D text, and I'm going to talk about both of them, and we're going to use both of them in this project. But the first one is I'm going to be using is the type on text. And why I'm using the type on text is because I want to reveal basically one letter at a time the title of this. So I'm going to be using Bank Gothic. I think it's a nice font for the kind of an action movie. So I just type in the title, Action Man, hit apply, and there it is, throws it right in there. Already you can see it's got a nice bevel, it's 3D text, but we're not going to leave it just at the default. We're going to actually add some stuff to this. First thing I want to do is here underneath where it says render, it says use comp camera. I'm going to turn that on. I've got a few different things that I'm using 3D Boris effects that I'm going to want to use the comp camera with. I am going to have a camera down here to control lots of the movements, and so I'm just going to set this now so I don't forget to do that in the future. Now let's look down here in the extrusion. This is where we kind of set the initial look of, well, I guess the shape of the text. So we've got the depth. I can crank that up so it's really deep. Or not so. Let's actually go ahead and bring in a camera right now. I'm just going to have this, say, at a 50 millimeter preset. And I'm going to turn this all on its side just to make sure that it's the depth I want. And it might be a little bit deep, and I also want to make sure that there's bevels on the back, because I'm going to use those bevels when I'm creating the look of this text that I want. So let's go back to the 3D text. And let's bring the extrusion down. And the bevel amount down quite a bit. I just want a nice edge to it. You can see there's just a small little edge there. And let's make sure we also bevel the back. Okay, so let's come in here, and what next? We need to add a material to this. So one thing about this Boris effects is in the materials, there's all of these presets, and I can click through, and it's going to change the look of the text really quickly and easily. And there's, you know, brick and rock and stone and all sorts of different things. So that's a quick way to kind of get a look, but let's go back to the default, and let's just kind of adjust from the default so you can see how that works as well. Now right here it says material count, and it says same on all sides. I can choose if I want to have one material that goes on everything, or I can also choose individuals. So I can have the front and back the same and the bevel on the sides the same, but what I want is the front and back and actually the side to be the same and the bevel to be different. So I need to choose 3 because that's the one where the bevel is by itself. Because I'm going to use, if you remember in my example, I've got this kind of this silver edge on it. And so that's where I colored the bevel. So when I switched to that, what happened is now we've got this material, and this material. You see those are disabled before that. But now that I switch, I can now set those materials individually. So let's first start on the front. And let's change the color to kind of a dark red. And if I want, I can also add, say, a little bit of texture to this. And I'm going to use that from the bump file. So I'm going to just come in here into the front bump file, click here, and there's all sorts of presets there. So let's find, let's just find one. Let's see what a K-wall looks like. And I'm just kind of going through here, seeing if there's one that I like. Okay, I kind of like that brush metal look. And then there's some other things, like we can come in here and change highlight amount, opacity, specular strength, things like that. I'm going to bring the bump strength down. And then maybe let's make this a little bit darker. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to use the same look on the sides as well. And instead of recreating this, what I'm going to do is come into the material preset. And I'm going to save this. So give it a name. Call it Action Man Red. And then now that's saved as a preset. So when I come into the sides, which I also want red, I can just simply come in here and find that Action Man Red that I saved, and it applied it on there. Pretty slick. So let's go down to the bevel now. And I think with the bevel, I can just find one of these already preset ones. Let's see what the chrome looks like. And I like the chrome. Maybe we can change a little bit of this, the highlight and the specular, to kind of make it pop a little bit more. So there is that. Now, I want to animate this so it comes on one at a time. And that's using the type on effect. But let's just kind of go down. The next thing I want to do, though, is in the transformations, let's make sure that I've got this scaled where I want. So I'm going to scale that down a little bit. Change the position so it's right in the center. Okay. So now let's use the type on effect to transform from into this Action Man titles. So down here we have this type on reveal and the type off reveal. So I'm going to click on type on. And how it works is where it's at now is the default state. This is where it's going to end. And then I just have to come in here and pick what I want it to be at the beginning. So I can rotate. Let's have it rotate. Let's go 90 degrees. And then maybe kind of back as well. And then let's also change the fade. And so then as I play through this, you're going to see it fade and rotate on. And what determines how fast that is this reveal time and this overlap. How the overlap works is if it's at 100, that means it's going to do 100% of that letter before it does the next letter. If it's below 100, it means it'll do, say, 50% of that letter transition, then it starts, or actually it'll do, if it's below 100, it takes time in between each letter. If it's over 100, it starts to do multiple letters at once. I got that backwards. So if we set this to, say, 50, I'm going to actually bring this down to half so it renders a little bit faster. Then it'll do one, it'll wait, it'll do another, it'll wait, it'll do another, it'll wait. If we go over 100, let's say 300, then it's going to start to have them overlap. You see how they're overlapped as they transition on. And I think that's what I want. Let's maybe go to 400. And a lot of this is just kind of previewing and seeing the time, the timing. Okay. I like that. And if I wanted to go faster, I can just change this reveal time. Now let's go ahead and add a little bit more to this. I'm going to just come up to Effects, color correction, add a curves to this. I want to maybe boost the contrast. And then let's also go into the Boris effects and let's go to the lights. And I want to add a light sweep. Now I know After Effects has their own light sweep, but I really like this Boris light sweep for the main reason is this controller that's right in the middle. It's really easy to use. I can just grab the center and move it to wherever I want, and then grab these different circles and adjust the light sweep. Really easy to use. Let's come in here, and then if I want to come in here and do more, I can do more in the over here in the FX controls. But how you can see how that kind of just adds a little bit more of a depth to that. Really simple to use. Now that we have this Action Man titles, let's do these vertical lines. And this was actually really fun to do because let's grab a new solid. Call this lines because I'm actually using the 3D text for this as well. So if we come into the 3D objects, and this time let's just do the extruded text. And I'm just going to use the letter I, make sure there's no serifs on it. So it's just a straight line. Click apply. And there we got some straight lines. And I don't want actually any bevel or extrusion on this. So I'm going to set that to 0 and the bevel down to 0 as well. Because why I'm using this 3D text is they've got these cool deform options to be able to do some random motion. So let's come down to the transformation. Let's move that up so it's right on top. And then perhaps let's scale that way so it kind of covers up the whole title. And in the 3D text, we can come down. At the bottom, there's these deformers. There's jitter, curl, shatter, ripple, pulse, things like that. And I'm going to be using the jitter. And if I jitter the X position, let's watch what happens. Things just kind of move around on their own. Let's bring that speed down. Maybe a little further. Let's go down to 20. And you can see they're kind of moving around. And what I want to do is I want to take this jitter position, keyframe that on the X position. Let's go forward to where the title is all the way revealed. And then bring that position down to 0. And you can see it kind of reorders it and straightens everything out. So they're kind of moving around randomly, and then as it gets closer to revealing the full title, it's starting to reorganize it and straighten everything out. And that's kind of the look I want to go for this. Okay. Looking good. All right, now I also want to reveal this across, and so what I'm going to use for that is just a track matte. So let's grab a new solid layer, call it matte, and then let's just add a blur to this. Just a fast blur is fine, and we'll just blur horizontally. And let's see what 100 does. And I'm also going to scale this out. And so let's put this matte right above the lines. Go to the beginning. We'll keyframe the position. I'm going to go ahead and actually hide that for now so I can see. Go to the end. And move it off. So it looks like this. And I might want to come in here and maybe blur that a little bit more. And then if I use this as a track matte, so if you, in After Effects, you have this toggle switches and modes down here at the bottom. If your project looks like this, you're in the switches. I can switch it over to the modes. And in the modes, if I go to the lines and add it as an alpha matte, what that does is it takes the alpha from the layer above it and applies it to that layer. So you can see now that it's going to fade that out as it reveals across. Really quick, simple way of doing that. Okay, so I do want to add some kind of glowy glintness to this. So let's come to those lines again. Go to the Boris lights, and we're going to add a glint. And I don't want it to look like a star glow, though. I want it to be kind of straight. And so what we have is under the glint counts right there, it's set to 4. I can bring that up and it looks more like a star. But if I set that to 2, well, then there's only 2 and it's a straight line. So let's grab this angle, set it to 0. And let's start messing around with these settings in order to create the look we want. So like the width, I want it to be the same width as those letters. Bring the height up. And maybe the glow. You know what would be really cool is if we had it more bright to begin with, and then we kind of brought that glow down. So let's maybe keyframe this brightness at the beginning, and then here at the end where it's starting to go away, we can bring that brightness down. That's looking pretty cool. All right, let's do a quick preview of what we've got going on. And I'm liking that. So now let's add a subtext to this, like I had in the example. And I'm going to just use a normal text layer. Make sure I've got it in the same font. Bank Gothic is what I used. And let's go ahead and make that medium. Align this to right below. And at this point, let's move this down so I've got it right above the mat. I don't want it to be, actually I can move it down below the lines. And then let's make sure that we have it set to 3D. We're going to want that 3D. And also the motion blur on. And speaking of 3D, I need to make sure on my lines, I forgot to do this, on the use comp camera, we need to make sure that's 3D as well. Again, because we wanted to use this comp camera. So back to this man of action. What I want to add to this is just kind of a blast of light to reveal it. So let's go to Boris Lights, and let's use the Lens Flare 3D. So immediately, just the default lens flare looks so much better than the default one that comes with After Effects that we all know and have probably used too many times. If you've used the default After Effects lens flare once, you've used it too many times. So let's come in here, and what I want to show you is how you can easily pick different lens flares. And on every Boris effect, there's this thing called the effects browser. If I click on that, then it's not showing up. I think my computer is slowing down a little bit. Let's try this again. Okay, so just a little bit of technical difficulties, but that's okay, because what we can do is I've got another version of the lens flare I'm going to be using, and it should show it there. But on this, let's put this right on top of the man of action. And I'm going to come down and I'm going to play with these settings down here. I can turn on and off all these different elements in the lens flare. And because I don't want all of these elements, I just want this kind of this line in the middle. So let's come in here and just kind of start turning them off and make sure that I keep what I want. Yep, that's the one I want. I want that stripe there. And almost there. There. So that's what I want to do. And what we can do is use this as a reveal for this text. So let's go to right where the 3D text is almost on. Up here is, and again, let's make sure we use comp camera on this, because we're going to need to do that. And then this global intensity, that's what we're going to use to reveal it on. So let's start it down at 0. Keyframe, let's go forward a few frames. And I'm just using the page up, page down. That's what goes through your frames. Increase the intensity. Maybe about to right here. Go forward a few frames, bring that back down to 0. And if I were to just hit that layer, highlight the layer man of action, hit U on the keyboard, I can see where those keyframes are. And okay. Now what I want to do is I want to change, I want to have this text fade on. The problem is since I applied this directly to the layer, if I were to change the opacity on this layer, it changes the opacity altogether. So we need to do a workaround for that. And there's a really easy way to do that since this is a text layer. If I come into the text animate and then just grab opacity down here in the animation menu, well then I can keyframe that. So let's keyframe the opacity of that down here, and then it's not going to change the opacity of the lens flare. So nice little trick and a workaround for that. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. At least we're getting close to the end of the titles, and we're going to move into the. We kind of put a lens flare and then the logo on it. But first, I want to kind of make this feel a little bit more cinematic. So I'm going to grab a new solid layer. Let's make it black. Give it a name. Crop. And I'm actually going to just cheat on this and kind of eyeball it, mask it out. So I'm going to just mask that black layer. And then invert that mask. And what we got is kind of a nice cinematic crop going on. And again, it's just eyeballing it. And I can move the mask. I just hit Command T and it'll put your mask into free transform. And I can move it up and down using the arrow keys on my keyboard. Now we're going to want this crop to be the very top, so that we don't want any of the elements to be over top of it, because then it would ruin the whole effect. So, but we do want to have a reveal at the beginning with a lens flare. So let's grab a new solid layer, give it a name, make sure it's below the crop, and let's go back to this lens flare. So under lights, 3D lens flare, and let's try this effects browser. There we go. Now it's working good. I think it was just because it was on text, it wasn't working the way I wanted it to. And with this effects browser, you can see all of these great presets already made. And it's as simple as finding the one you want and then hitting apply. And it brings it right in there. Now, I like this one But what I don't like is I don't like that red vertical line through there. So again, but I can just come in here and find where that is. It the stripe, I think. Yep, right there, that stripe. I can just turn it off right there. Or if I wanted to, I can come in here and change it. Maybe I wanted it to be blue, or the angle to be a different angle. That's not what I want. I want 90 degrees. Maybe I want it like that. But I think I actually just want it off completely. But it's really easy to come in here and take the presets from the effects browser and just change it to however you need for your project. Let's start this kind of right here in the middle. So I'll come down to flare. Hold on, the autosave is going again. I love autosave, but it always autosaves right in the middle of something I'm trying to do. But then it saves your butt all of the time. Okay, so let's keyframe the global intensity. Actually, let's make sure I'm at the beginning, so I'm going to move that keyframe to the beginning. Bring that intensity up so it's all white. Go forward a few frames. And it's easy as just bringing that down. Now, what you'll notice, though, is it just brings it down to the black. What we need to do is come down here to the toggle switches and modes, make sure we're on modes, and switch the mode of that flare layer to screen, or even add might be kind of cool. Yeah, I like add. I might come down here to the lines and maybe bring those down. The intensity on that. Let's maybe have that as an add as well. I'm really liking the look of this. One thing I might want to do is maybe add a little bit of color to the background. So if we come to the particle layer, and under appearance, let's see, where am I at? We can switch the start color using custom color, and we can change that custom color to a different color. So let's add maybe a little bit of greenish blue to this. Not so much green, a little more tealy blue. And that adds a different color because I'm changing the color of the particle, and that's changing the color of the background. Okay. Now all we need to do is bring in our logo and do some camera movements. So I've got the camera here, and what I want to do is I'm going to grab a new null object because I want to do a big rotation. And it's easier with a null. So give that null a name. Make sure it's 3D because the camera's 3D. Let's parent the camera to that null. And first, let's right here where the letters are revealed, let's come into the position of that camera, keyframe that, go to the beginning, and I'm going to go ahead and just turn off that flare for now. And oh, yeah, my camera was in the wrong spot. Just put it back to where it goes. And let's move forward in Z space, and then you can see it's going to zoom out. As the camera zooms out, as it's kind of revealing. I might want to do that a little bit more, so I'm going to crank it and really go a lot forward with this, so that it kind of has a a quick zoom out feel. That's looking pretty good. Let's turn back on that flare. And just before we get any further, I want to do a quick preview, see where I'm at. So I'm going to just hit the RAM preview button. And we'll go forward a little bit. I'm just previewing at half resolution. And also when it's doing the preview, it's not previewing in 16-bit. So the background is looking a little bit posterized, but that's fine. This is just as an example. And I'm going to go ahead and move my camera a little bit. Okay. And then the Action Man pops on and things are looking good. So let's bring in our last final 3D layer. So let's grab a new solid. Call this the logo. And something cool is under the 3D objects is we've got this extrude EPS. And I went ahead and I built a logo for this title specifically. I just built it in Illustrator. It's an EPS file. Really simple to use. So let's come down here and load. Find your file. And you can see it's like an A with an action fist because he's Action Man. And then that brings that in. Now what it's doing is if we come into material, let's see. Let's grab that Action Man red. And make sure I also have this on set on 3, so I have the front, back, bevel, and sides. And I need some lights on this. So let's use the two-sided lighting. And there's one last thing that I can't remember. So excuse me while I find this last little option. There's so many options in here, sometimes I get a little bit lost. Peter, if you want to jump in, how do I turn it off so it's taking the color from the EPS and using this material instead?
Okay, hi Mikey. I just had to unmute myself, but let's see. You want to turn off the Keep EPS Color. That's one thing that you're going to want to do.
Yeah.
Because the original EPS file was black, and so that'll be in Materials.
Okay.
Right below your mouse, just 2 steps down. Keep EPS Color.
Oh, right there. The little, got it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. And then make sure that's below the crop. Yeah, so the EPS was black, and so it just grabbed that color there. So let's do the same thing, though, on the sides. Take off the Keep EPS Color and grab my Action Man red. And then on the bevel, we're going to use that chrome look. Now, let's go back to this. One thing I do need to do, though, is I need to flip this around. But let's do that after we rotate the camera. That's going to be how I do the reveal. So let's come down to the camera null, go into the rotation, click the keyframe on the Y rotation, go forward a few frames and do a 180. Make sure on that logo that I've got this use comp camera. And you can see it's going to rotate that around. And that's how we're going to reveal. But what we can do is after the rotation, let's come down onto this logo, go into the transformations, and we're going to rotate Y 180 degrees. And let's come in here and do a little bit more with this material. Make it look I want. It's looking pretty dark. So that's with the lights. Where am I at? Front material. And bring the extrusion down. It's a little thick. Bevel down. Let's So I'm right now just messing with the light to try to get this red to work. Now it's not working. That's the way things go. As soon as you have an audience, things don't work the way that you had them just 10 minutes before you started the presentation. Again, Peter, if you know what's wrong, why isn't this red showing up the way it should be?
Hi, Mike. I just unmuted myself again. I think I'm wondering if you need to move the position of the lights in Z space, because it could be that the light is actually somewhere in the middle or in front of that extruded EPS.
Right. That could be it. Yes, that's exactly it.
I'm gonna mute myself again.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Okay, so let's bring the transformation of that logo down. So I'm just going to use the master scale to bring it down. And what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of a curve to this, and that's again down with these deformers. So we can go into the bend, and you can see I can bend that. Looks really cool. I can even animate that if I wanted to, make it look like it's a flapping bird or something. So let's bend that just a little bit. And now that it's bent, I think I do need to have it a little bit thicker. So let's come back up to the extrusion. Okay, so let's take a look at this turning around. And this is where we do a transition. So right about here, where it's partly turned, I'm going to just keyframe the opacity, bring that down to 0, go forward a couple of frames, bring that up, and then we're going to do the same thing to the action man and the subtitle. So come down to the action man. Both of those opacity, bring them down to 0 at this point, and then have them start at 100. Okay, let's take a look at that. Looking pretty good. Now let's add some motion blur to this. So down in the render, on each layer, we can enable motion blur. And if you put the smoothness to highest, it's going to sample more blurs, makes it look nicer. Let's do that also on the 3D text. Enable motion blur and on highest. And let's take a look at this transition. Oh, let's make sure I enable motion blur globally as well, so the man of action title is That's a pretty darn cool looking transition. Now, one thing is the background gets really dark right here because that is a flat image. Super easy fix. I'm going to just take this particle layer, duplicate it, and then rotate one of them. And then what happens is then we've got kind of that look where, yeah, looking pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and actually add motion blur to those particles. So that about does it. Let me do a quick render, and while that's kind of doing a RAM preview, it looks like we have time for some questions. But I wanted to actually, if you need to get a hold of me, CinemaSpice, Twitter, YouTube. Actually, this I need to actually have this. I can't RAM preview this at the same time, so I'll show you that in a second. While I RAM preview this one, but cinemaspice.net, that's the website. I have things for sale there, presets, some templates, stock footage, things like that. YouTube.com/user/longlivemikey. That's my YouTube page, and I do tutorials twice a week. I've got one coming out tomorrow, actually, with a brand new preset that I'm giving away for free. That's really, really cool. And lots of tutorials and giveaways and presets and stuff like that. And you'll want to follow me there. So I know I promoted to my YouTube channel for people to come watch this webinar. So if you're already one of my subscribers, thank you so much. And if you're not, consider subscribing. I do lots of fun stuff there. And then I'm also on Twitter at LongLiveMikey. It's a good place to get a hold of me there. So what kind of... I'm ready to take some questions.
Hi, everybody. First, I'd just like to thank you, Mikey, for such a wonderful presentation. You know, we have a lot of people present for us, professional presenters and very high-level users of the hosts for which we're showing product. And I really, really enjoyed the way you demonstrated the software today. I mean, you have such great knowledge of the host, and thank you for sharing all those tips and tricks with everybody. It was really great. And I'd like to thank everybody for sitting in with us today. I hope you gained a lot of knowledge out of that. Mikey just shared with you some really cool compositing tips and tricks and how to use BCC filters to generate something which would take a lot of skill and a lot of hours inside of multiple packages to produce. But because of the power of the BCC filters, he was able to do it all without leaving the host. So one of the first questions, and this is pretty typical of all of the webinars that we do, is can you tell us a little bit about the system that you're using? Because you were flying along there, and everybody wants to know how fast was your computer.
Yeah, I can actually. I'll just bring up my about this Mac. So I am on the late 2013 iMac. I've got 32 gigs of RAM, 3.5 gigahertz i7. So this is the last model iMac that they made just before the Retina display one.
That's an incredible amount of RAM. And thankfully, both the host and the BCC product are 64-bit and can address all of that wonderful memory and speed things up. And speaking of speeding things up, there's another question that we had, and let's see, this question was from Graham Cohen, and he was asking about the GPU acceleration in the filters. Now, there are some filters in the product which are 100% GPU accelerated, and today, Mikey, you were showing quite a few of them, like the lens flare, that's all GPU accelerated, the 3D objects filters, both the type-on text and the extruded text and the extruded EPS, they're all GPU enabled. And they worked really well for you, I think. How did they feel when you're setting things up and moving things around?
Good. Is the lens blur? Is that one GPU accelerated?
Well, we have two versions of the lens blur, actually. One of them is and one of them isn't. So the one that's called fast lens blur, that's all GPU accelerated. The one that doesn't have the fast in front of it, that's a CPU filter.
Well, whatever it was, it's a lot faster than the stock lens blur that comes with After Effects, even though I don't think I even use the fast one.
and faster, and there are more options in there. I mean, that's, I think, one of the great things about us as a third-party solutions expert house. What we do is sometimes we'll look at the host and we'll say, gosh, here's a problem that people are encountering on a day-to-day basis, such as adding lens blur to create bokeh in a shot. And while it looks great and it's a really cool in-lens camera style effect, the amount of time that it might take the host to create this and render it out is multiples of what it would be for us, because we optimize everything. We spend many engineering hours just looking at where the bottlenecks are and working with this kind of an effect, and then we try to streamline this and speed it up and make a performance-tuned version of this effect, which seemed to work well in this case.
Yeah, I was impressed with the speed.
Another question was about presets, Mikey, and somebody was asking, gosh, I saw these modifications to the lens flare. But what happens if I save this? Do I kill my effect? Have I saved over anything? And you can save out versions of all of this stuff. And Mikey, I think you were showing the browser there. You showed it in two places. In one place, yes, it was over a text element in 3D, and that's why you weren't getting that
right
expected preview. But then you like figured that out and applied it to a solid. You were able to get it just well with the lens flare. But how did you find that the presets in the lens flare, for instance? Useful.
Well, yeah, super simple to just click on the browser and look at everything. And again, I'm not one to just take a stock preset. I always have to tweak it, but that's not difficult at all. After you pick the one that you like, it's a good jumping off point, and you can go in and make little changes here and there.
And save them out, and then reuse them on in this project and future projects. And as I mentioned in my response to the question on the board, you can use these in different hosts and across platforms. So, for instance, you were on After Effects on a Macintosh. Mm-hmm. If you were passing this project off to somebody else who happened to be in a different, on Windows, for instance, on a different platform, and maybe even inside of an Avid Media Composer, you can save out not only a static, but an animated and keyframed preset that you've created, and open this on a different platform on Windows, on a different host, say on Media Composer, and save all that keyframed animation. It's a tremendously powerful part of the product, and it's inside every filter in the product. Very, very useful. And I think we're at 2 o'clock, and we've run out of time for the questions. But before I go, I just want to say a few words of thanks again to Mikey for such a wonderful presentation and for sharing your ideas with us. I mean, everybody, I'm sure, got a lot out of that. And thanks everybody for attending. And please make sure to visit Mikey's website. He's got some great stuff in there. Maybe if you want to flash up your that information again for us so everybody can see it. There you go.
And if you follow me on YouTube, I've got some new different training things that I'm going to be revealing here next month, and that's where I'm going to be revealing it, is on YouTube. And also, Peter, if you don't mind, I'd love to take this project file and clean it up a little bit and then send it off to you guys if anyone wants to download this project file and the EPS that I used.
That's very generous of you. Thank you. We're going to take you up on that, and we're going to post it on our site. And we could also include this in a link in our weekly newsletter, which goes out to hundreds of thousands of people globally. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be taking fair advantage of your generosity there. Thank you.
Yep.